Welcome back to the Bullpen Mafia. We are joined by a legend of Dade in his own right, Jesse Agler, University of Miami graduate and the radio play-by-play voice of the San Diego Padres. Jesse, thank you so much, man, for hopping on with us.
Hey, my absolute pleasure. You guys do great work, and an honor to be able to hop in with you.
So before we get into our Padres conversation here, I wanted to give our listeners your background, your story, because it's unique. Not a lot of East Coast, South Florida guys find themselves going out west. You've been lucky enough to work for the pro sports teams in South Florida, Miami, one of the best cities to live in the U.S., and arguably you move to maybe the only city that's better than Miami in San Diego. How did you find your way to the Padres, man?
Oh boy, it was a long and winding road. But kind of the short version of the story is that when I was working for the Dolphins, which is where I was right before I went to the Padres, it kind of became known that I was a baseball guy first, and I love football. Don't get me wrong. I still follow Hurricanes football probably as closely as I follow the Padres, but not really, but close. And, I love the NFL and it's so big here in Miami and it was always such a fun thing to be a part of. But, getting the opportunity to go do baseball was kind of the thing I dreamed about since I'm not kidding, like 6, 7, 8 years old. Like all I wanted to do was be a baseball announcer. And I was so honored to be a part of the broadcast team for the Dolphins and to play kind of a small role, on that side and getting to know Joe Rose and Kim Bocamper and Jimmy Cefalo and Jim Mandich back in the day and kind of getting to be around these guys who I grew up listening to, I grew up idolizing. There was a leadership change at the Padres. They knew about my baseball affinity. There was an opening there. Jerry Coleman was a long ago Yankee, won World Series with the Yankees in the 50s, had been a longtime broadcaster for the Padres. Sadly, he had passed away. So they kind of had, an opening there. And my name was thrown out and I was lucky enough to kind of catch that big break, that you always hear about in this business. And I got the opportunity to go out to San Diego. 2014, I had never been to San Diego in my life until they flew me out there to kind of interview, the recruit for the position, whatever you want to call it. And, I fell in love immediately. The drive in San Diego from the airport to the ballpark is about 10 minutes, not even. It's a downtown airport, a downtown ballpark. And I just remember sitting in that cab. I can still picture it so vividly and just kind of looking out the windows and being like, this place is unbelievable. And he took me right to Petco Park. It was like 11 o'clock at night. It took me into the dugout, out onto the field, and that's all I needed to see. I was ready to go. It's a great memory, and lucky enough to kind of be along for the ride with this Padre franchise that has become, I think, as compelling, interesting, and exciting a team as there is in Major League Baseball.
So 2 takeaways from your story. One, it was a while ago. You have tenure with the Padres because you took a cab to the ballpark and not an Uber.
Yes.
And another thing I want to ask you, I was reading an article when I was doing my prep for this interview, and I didn't have a subscription to whether it was the LA Times, one of the big newspapers, and I got to read the first couple articles, and it was about you and your interview with the Dolphins. I don't remember the name of who you were interviewing with. You spoke it into existence. You were very candid. You were very open with them, like, hey, yeah, I love this opportunity with the Dolphins. But at the end of the day, I want to get into baseball. How did they handle that? Can you give some of the background on that story?
Yeah, so that's kind of the funny story, I guess. I'm interviewing with the Dolphins, and the interview had been delayed, like 4 or 5 times. It kept getting moved and pushed back. And it was kind of like the clock was ticking, like, hey, we got to get this in. But, the bosses are busy, right? And this wasn't like the top priority at the top of the food chain, but they wanted to sign off on it. And so, finally I get the call, and I was living in Delray at the time, and it was like, hey, can you be down here? And it was at the stadium, like that's where the offices were. They're like, can you be down here in 30 minutes? And I was like, yeah, of course, right? Like, you got a job interview, you got to go. Forget the fact that I live 40 minutes away and I had like 103 fever, like worst flu of my life. I'm all hopped up on like flu meds, Dayquil, whatever. So I like take the fastest shower ever. I race down there, and I go in and one of the questions that was asked to me was, what's your dream job? And I think like my inhibitions were down a little bit because of the Dayquil, but also, I was kind of still pretty young in the business and just answered honestly. And I said, I want to be a baseball play-by-play announcer. And the room kind of went silent, and then everybody started laughing. And I was like, in my mind, I was kind of like, F it. They asked me a question. I gave them an answer. I'm not going to lie and say that, this is my dream job. This is a great opportunity and an exciting opportunity, but my dream job is to be a baseball announcer. So I said that. And yeah, that was remembered 4 years later when I got the opportunity out in San Diego. As
a South Florida native, and now you're obviously a radio play-by-play guy. You are an employee of a professional team. Do you still have opportunities to be a fan of some of the South Florida teams? The Panthers are back-to-back Stanley Cup champs. The Heat went to the finals recently as well. They had a tough stretch this year. You said you're a big Canes fan. I'm sure you're still a Dolphins fan. Are you still plugged in with South Florida sports? Do you consider yourself a Panthers fan? Is it easy to be plugged in on the West Coast?
It's not easy. It's the time difference, obviously, but then also, like, I have 2 little kids now. And so in the off season, the baseball off season, right? Like all those NFL Sundays, the Panther games, in the winter or whatever, or the Heat games. Like, I don't see my kids a lot during the baseball season naturally because of the schedule that we have. So I try and be dad mode first. My son is 9, my daughter's 4. So it's not, I don't think I can just be like, to my wife and kids, be like, hey, Sunday, I'm going to sit down and watch Red Zone all day. It wouldn't be a good look. So I wouldn't call it plugged in, but I follow. And, the Panthers, that was my first opportunity to be on a major league broadcast. It was all the way back coming out of the NHL lockout, I think in 2005. I got to do pregame, intermission, and postgame on the Panther radio broadcast on WQAM. Steve Goldstein, who's now the TV voice of the Panthers, that was his first year as the radio voice for the Panthers. And he basically hooked me up with that gig. I'd gotten to know Goldie a little bit that summer, working at QAM, and he basically was like, hey, there's this opportunity. I think you'd be great for it. And it was maybe the biggest thing that's ever happened in my career. And so that kind of led me into doing the Panthers pre and post, which led directly into doing the Marlins pre and post for 2 years after that. Got to fill in on the Marlin broadcast. So, the soft spot I have and the affection I have for the teams here is not just as a fan and as a kid who grew up down here rooting for these teams. Like the 97 Marlins were a huge deal, right? I was 15 years old. Like that was gigantic. But it goes beyond that. It's a professional thing and an attachment I have to a lot of the people I worked with. And when the Panthers won that first cup, which is crazy now they have 2. The first thought I had was just being so happy for Goldie, for Randy Moeller, these guys who took me under their wing when I was 24 years old and just trying to find my footing in the business, that those guys get rings, that franchise has gotten to the place it's gotten. And it was at some low points back then, man. It was ugly. It's something that makes me really happy on a human level, which is maybe even deeper than a fan level. But when it comes to like true fandom, it's Hurricanes football is the one I'm probably most locked in on. Thank you, Mario, for making it matter again. Oh my gosh. And like last year, the first game against Florida in Gainesville, we were in Tampa playing the Rays. I was doing that series on TV, and I was like so trying not to get distracted while calling the Padre game, worrying about what Cam was doing to the Gators, but, kind of checking the phone between innings. And as that day got better and better and better for the Canes, it was just awesome. And I knew it was going to be a special year last year. Obviously didn't end the way we all wanted, but that's kind of the one I've carved out. Hurricanes football is like the one I still try and follow, weekly and all that kind of thing. And, I was there lucky enough in school when it was like that heyday in the early 2000s. I was there for 4 years at UM, and I saw them go to 4 different BCS games. I saw them win a national championship. I was at the Fiesta Bowl calling it on WVUM student radio when they got robbed against Ohio State. So, I was so lucky to be there at that time. And those connections, those memories are so significant to me.
I'm glad you brought up Steve Goldstein. Unfortunately, I don't have the pleasure of listening to a lot of your calls in the Padres games unless it's the national one on XM when I'm rarely in my car at midnight when the Padres are on in Miami. I'm curious, do you have a let's go home baby of yours for Padres games?
The only thing kind of like close to a signature call, and it kind of happened by accident, but it's the home run call. And I think baseball on the radio, like you kind of need one. And at first I was very against the idea of it. I didn't like having a call, but it just sort of happened naturally when they were in the COVID playoffs in 2020 against the Cardinals. They had a huge home run game. Tatis hit 2 homers. Will Myers hit 2 homers in the same game. And for whatever reason, it just kind of came out. And I said, gonna go. And like that's turned into like a kind of signature home run call. People love it. It's, one of those things. It's pretty wild. Like, kids, grown-ups, they come up to you at the ballpark or in the grocery store and they're like, "Gonna go," and it's
that's got to be surreal for you, man, because you grew up in a huge sports town and now you're one of the faces of the San Diego Padres. As a Miami guy, the people I think of who I associate with the Florida and Miami Marlins, Dave Van Horn, Tommy Hutton, Rich Waltz, these guys, broadcasters, good dudes like you who obviously genuinely care and have great calls. Kids, I will speak for all of us and listeners, we associate you and our fandom of the team as much as the guys on the field as the people that we're listening to on TV and the radio.
I mean, that's how I was growing up. Like I tell the story sometimes, like when I would come to games as a kid at Joe Robbie, or when we go up to New York and visit my grandparents, go to Shea or whatever, I'd get to my seats wherever they were. And the first thing I did every time, and I didn't really realize I was doing it till I was an adult, kind of looking back at it, but every time I come to a game, I would look up and kind of try and find the announcers in the broadcast booth. I mean, that's how much I cared about it. That's how big of a deal it was to me. And, I was the kid, with the tape recorder in the 90s, turning down the sound on the TV and doing my own play-by-play and, having the computer play against itself on the video games and, trying to announce that way. It's a deep, significant thing. And the craziest part to me now is like that I've been here as long as I have with the Pods, 12 seasons, is that like I had a guy come up to me, he's like in his early 20s in spring training this year. And he's like, "I've been listening to you since I was a kid." And I'm like, this dude has a beard. Like, how is that even possible? But like, time flies when you're having fun, and it's been quite a ride.
Let me tell you how important broadcasters are. I'm a Florida State guy, so don't hold that against me, please.
That's all right. My sister went there.
When I was lucky enough to work for Florida State football for a few seasons before I started with the Dolphins, and I'll never forget my first week on the job. I call my dad. I'm like, "Dad, you're not going to believe this. I just left my first press conference with Jimbo. He shook my hand, whatever, like, welcome to the team." And the first question my dad goes, he skips over the Jimbo stuff. He goes, "Did you meet Gene Deckerhoff?" I was like, "Yes, Dad, I met Gene Deckerhoff." And he was more enthused that I met Gene Deckerhoff, and Gene Deckerhoff knew my name than Jimbo Fisher. But
no, I'm just thinking like, it's, we talk about it sometimes amongst ourselves and it sounds self-aggrandizing and maybe obnoxious, but like, like you really get the sense from a lot of people is that, they invite you into your home every night, baseball especially, the everyday nature of it. And like, they tell us like, you feel like you're part of our families, because we hear you every day. On the radio, we're stuck in traffic listening to you. We get home and put on the TV, we hear you guys. And like, it's a really humbling thing to hear. And it's a very special connection. I agree. I felt it when I was a kid. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those pinch me things that I get the opportunity to do this.
Jesse, one more Miami question before we dive into the Padres here a little bit. I know we have about 10 or 15 more minutes with you here.
Sure.
You're again a Miami guy, South Florida guy. What is your first stop when you land at Miami International Airport? When you're playing the Marlins, you're at Lone Depot Park right now. I should have mentioned this in the intro. We're speaking with you now because the Marlins are hosting the Padres at Lone Depot Park this week for a 3-game set in the building that Kyle Stowers built.
San Diegan.
Yeah, and there we go. He's a Cali kid as well. What's your can't miss spot when you're in South Florida when you come back to Miami?
I mean, the sad thing about the baseball schedule is that, if you don't have a day off, you're probably not getting out to dinner. I mean, I don't like to eat late at night. I'm too old for that now. So, like this trip, we got in yesterday, Sunday from DC, got to the hotel like 10:30 at night, something like that. So it's like, all right, unpack, take a shower, pretty much head to bed, do a little work maybe. Woke up this morning, tried to get a run in, and then I remembered how humid it was and did some more work. And then I was like, come to the ballpark. So, if we have a day off here, one time I took a couple of the Padre announcers who had never been before to Versailles just to go, give them a little bit of a taste of
the what you're doing.
Yeah. One time on an off day, I went down to the Gables and I walked around the campus because I hadn't been in a while and just kind of reminisced with one of my old friends and one of my old roommates there. So there's a nostalgia pull for sure. But it's funny, you asked what I think when I land. I mean, just sitting here right now, and I apologize in advance to the Marlins for saying this, but I think about the Orange Bowl, and I think about the great memories here and some of the tougher memories here. Literally right where I'm sitting right now, I'm looking out the glass window in left field, which was the east end zone, the open end zone at the Orange Bowl. And, some of the absolute best days of my life spent in that building. I remember, my first NFL game I ever went to was a Dolphin game here in the 80s. Obviously, all the Canes games when I was in school, and then after still coming, sometimes came to the last game ever here at the OB against Virginia, which was not a good night. And I still in my office at home, I've got an Orange Bowl seat hanging up. I've got, some rocks or bricks or whatever from the outside of the building. So that's always one of my early thoughts is, man, I miss the Orange Bowl, but it looks like they got Hard Rock pumping pretty good these days for the Canes, which I'm glad to see.
And if you want an authentic Orange Bowl experience, you can still park your car in someone's driveway if you want, man, before going into Lone Depot Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesse, the AJ Preller era of the San Diego Padres, the trade deadline is right around the corner. I think we're less than a month out. What's it like being associated with the Padres when you got a GM who's willing to wheel and deal? He's taking big shots every year to try and win the Padres' first World Series. Tell us a little bit about the AJ Preller era, and how he's completely turned the narrative around the San Diego Padres.
That's it. That's the main thing right there. Is it went, because I got there, my first year was 2014. He started the next year. I think he was hired in the winter of 14 into 15. So I got a taste of what it had been like. And it was as kind of boring and generic a team as there was, honestly. They had generic uniforms. They had mostly generic players. The ballpark was great. I was amazed right off the bat how well they drew. Because the team wasn't any good, and I got out there and it was like 30,000 a game, just because it's a nice thing to do and people love baseball there. It's a great baseball town, which is neat. But then AJ takes over. He immediately kind of shot for the moon. It was like Matt Kemp, Justin Upton, that kind of thing. I don't know if people remember that. It didn't really work out, but it kind of gave us a taste of what his thoughts were. And his thoughts were, we're going to go for it every year, every time. We're going to try and figure out a way to go for it. Now, they stepped back. They did a little bit of a rebuild. I would say signing Eric Hosmer, South Florida guy, really sort of started to turn the franchise in the direction it's headed now. They had Manny the next year, ultimate Miami guy. And that was it. Those are franchise altering moves. All the while, they acquire Fernando Tatis Jr. in a trade with the White Sox. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh man, this is starting to get real and get exciting. And then 2020, the short season with COVID was a great year. They made the postseason for the first time in 14 years, got to the division series against the Dodgers. Pitching injuries kind of derailed it. And they've been interesting ever since. And that's the way I put it, because this team was not interesting most of its first 50 years of existence. They went to the World Series in 84. They went to the World Series in 98. They won one total game in those two World Series. They won a couple of divisions in the early Petco era, 05 and 06, but they didn't really take it anywhere. They got knocked out by the Cardinals both times early, and so they didn't really build any momentum out of that. And they were just kind of boring, and now they are interesting. They are exciting. They are fun. They are energetic. And they haven't even hit their stride this year yet, and it's late July, but they're still a team that should really be in the playoffs this season. So, they've turned into something everybody cares about in San Diego. I've told this to people, and part of it is the Chargers leaving. There's no doubt. But the Chargers leaving and the Padres getting good kind of all happened at the same time.
Right.
And no kidding, because it is such a great baseball town, for the first time ever, the people who love baseball, which is seemingly everybody, now have a major league team that matters and that they can really invest in and care about. And we sell out almost literally every single game. And it's just incredible. And the Padres have kind of become the center of the culture in San Diego, which would have been laughable 15 years ago to suggest that could happen. And AJ and the way he approaches it has been a huge part of that.
One of those cornerstone players that you mentioned that AJ Preller signed to a Padre for life type of contract is a Miami kid, Manny Machado. Canes fans appreciate him because he's always training at the light. He's in the weight room with the Canes. What has he meant to the San Diego Padres fan base? He's the type of guy who's willing to jaw it up with the Dodgers when that rivalry gets going. He's a leader. I feel like in the locker room and on the field, he leads by example. What's he meant to the fan base? What's he like in person? And I really feel like he brings some of that Miami juice to the West Coast.
Definitely brings the Miami juice to the West Coast. We talk Canes football. He to answer your question with one word, what does he mean? Everything. Because not only is he a Hall of Fame trajectory player, he was the guy that when he chose the Padres, it was kind of like a flag being put in the ground that this place matters and that this is going to be a real deal kind of place. This is no longer going to be a sleepy Western outpost, that like teams go to see after they visit the Dodgers and the Angels. It's going to be its own thing and it's going to matter. And he's the center of all of that. And when he signed his new deal a couple of years ago, which, as you said, pretty much locks him up for most, if not all, of the rest of his career, I remember asking him, I was like, what's it feel like to know that you're the last guy that's ever going to wear number 13 in San Diego? And he was like, I hadn't thought about that. But I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Like they're going to retire his number. He just picked up his 2,000th hit the other day. He's got a real shot to hit 3,000 or to get to 3,000 hits in his major league career. I mean, some people suggested he might be the last guy to ever get to 3,000 hits with the way that, kind of the offensive profile of the sport has changed. And he's like a big leaguer personified. He's a guy that is going to play every single day. He broke his ankle a couple of years ago in Colorado. He missed like 10 days and he was hurt the rest of the year, but he came out and played. And I mean, you talk about leading by example. You talk about showing what it means. The Padres tonight, we're taping this Monday, are playing their 100th game of the season. And he's in the starting lineup against the Fish tonight. And he's the only guy to have started all 100 games for the Padres this year. I mean, and he's having as consistent and as electric of a season offensively as he's maybe had so far as a Padre. And then, we haven't even talked about the defense yet. And he's just a magician at third base. So fun to watch. And then I'll tell you what, because this is the thing that gets underreported, underdiscussed. I think Manny Machado's baseball IQ is as high as anybody in the game. Maybe number one in all of baseball. I mean, his baseball brain is incredible, and he's a joy to watch. It's an honor to get to watch him play every single night, and it is every single night.
Jesse, one last question here before we let you go and broadcast Padres Marlins tonight at 6:40 Eastern. You have a front row seat to the new best rivalry in all of baseball. Yeah. It has surpassed the Yankees Red Sox. It has surpassed Dodgers Giants. Dodgers-Padres is the best rivalry in all of baseball right now. The Marlins right now, us local guys, the Marlins, we're a rebuilding team. They don't really have a rivalry right now. The Atlanta, the Mets, the Braves, it's the big three, and then it's the Nats and the Marlins. Can you give us a peek behind the curtain from your vantage point of what this rivalry has turned into, how it's happened, and every time I watch Padres-Dodgers in Petco or in Dodger Stadium, it's a playoff atmosphere regardless what month it is.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And there's no doubt in my mind it's the best rivalry in baseball right now. Here's how it happens. Both teams have to be good. Let's start there. And then I think the real magic sauce is you have to have at least one, probably multiple postseason confrontations. And beyond that, they've now played each other in the postseason 3 times since 2020. Padres have won one of those series. I think that's the other critical piece. Had the Dodgers won all 3 playoff series, is that really a rivalry? Or is that just one team kicking around little brother? But the Padres knocked them out after they had that unbelievable regular season in 2022. They had the bye into the division series, and the Padres beat them. And it was one of the most incredible baseball things I've ever seen that series. It was so fun. It was so electric. It was so tense. It was so emotional. And that, I think, is the thing that solidified it as the rivalry. And now, all 4 regular season series they play against each other feel like October baseball. There's heightened stuff. Benches are clearing. Guys are yelling at each other. It's really one of those there's no love lost kind of situation. And again, I think without the Padres having knocked the Dodgers out of the playoffs, when the Dodgers thought they were a legitimate World Series team a few years ago, I don't know that it gets to this point. So that's the formula that's required. Both teams have to be really good. You have to get together a couple of times in the playoffs. Both teams need to win a playoff series. That's how you get to the point that we're at. And that's right. What the Yankees Red Sox was in the late 90s into the early mid 2000s. It was because both teams were good. Both teams, once the Red Sox finally got over the hump in 2004, it was like, okay, this is now a rivalry. It doesn't have to be Pedro, call me daddy, all that stuff. So it's really become so special and so fun. And you go into the season kind of figuring you're on a collision course with them, and we'll see how it plays out the rest of this regular season and what October has in store for both those teams. But it's as good as it gets. It really is.
Jesse, amazing stuff, man. Thank you so much for hopping on with some 305 guys. You always have a home with the Bullpen Mafia. We're looking forward to meeting you in person tomorrow night at Lone Depot Park. But again, from a couple Canes, I have my graduate degree from so I'm technically a Cane too. From a couple Canes to another, we really appreciate you hopping on with us.
Well, my pleasure. Always great to visit with the local folk and